Ayush Shalavadi, and I am delighted to welcome you all to Open House. It's an absolute pleasure to have you join us for what promises to be a day of engaging dialogue, fresh perspectives, and thought-provoking conversations. For over a decade, open media has been committed to providing insights that challenge conventional thinking and explore new ways of understanding the world around us. Today, we bring you a carefully curated series of discussions with some of India's most influential leaders, from politics to business, technology to social impact. This is a platform where we don't just scratch the surface. We dig deeper, offering you not just answers, but new ways to think about the issues that matter most to our future. As we go about today's sessions, we'll explore a range of critical topics, and in our final session, we'll dive into one of the most significant moments in the country's economic calendar, the Union Budget. We are truly privileged to welcome the Union Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, in the latter half, who will join us for a direct conversation about the budget and its transformative impact on India's economy. But before that, we have a full day ahead, filled with incredible insights and powerful voices from across industries and sectors. So without further ado, let's begin today's journey at Open House, a space where ideas, dialogue, and perspectives come together to shape our future. I'd like to thank our sponsors right at the beginning. Open House, powered by Galgotias University, and our associate partner, NBCC. Without further ado, let's begin with the first session. A discussion on India's future growth engines, a session focused on the sectors that will shape India's future. From renewable energy and semiconductors to aerospace and logistics, the opportunities are vast and diverse. But none are more urgent than the AI revolution. As global powers like China and the US race ahead in artificial intelligence, India must seize this moment to become a leader in AI-driven innovation. Can we harness technology to drive industries forward and position ourselves at the forefront of the global economy? We'll also explore challenges in talent, mindset shifts, and policies that lie ahead as we aim to lead in these critical sectors. Let me introduce our panel for this stellar evening. I'd like to call on stage Vineet Agarwal, Managing Director, Transport Corporation of India; Preeti Bajaj, MD and CEO, Luminous Power Technologies; Sachin Chopra, Founder and CEO, Alpha Vector; Manish Sharma, Chair and CEO, Panasonic India; and of course, my colleague Ajita Sashidhar, who will be moderating this session with me. A huge round of applause, please.
Thank you, Ayush. Welcome, everybody. And I hope you really enjoy this insightful discussion we're just going to have a few moments from now. And thank you, panelists, for making it at such a short notice. I know I've been breathing down your necks, and thank you so much. And especially Sachin, I just managed to convince you a day before, and thank you so much for traveling to all the way from Mumbai for this. Thank you. Thank you. So, India's future growth engines. That's the topic we're going to discuss today. And Preeti, I would like to start with you because my first question is around renewable energy. And India has set a very ambitious target of 2030 to achieve efficiency in all forms of renewable energy. It'll be interesting to hear from you whether are we on track when it comes to, are we on track to meet the 2030 deadline?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's a great question, are we on track? I think what we have done in the last few years is significant. Against the 500 gigawatt renewable energy target, we are already achieving in excess of 250 gigawatts. But there is yet work to be done for roughly 50 gigawatts to 60 gigawatts a year. Out of the 200 plus gigawatts that we've done, around 92 gigawatts was solar, around 46.93 gigawatts off the top of my head is, I think, wind, and then the remaining is of other renewable sources as well, biodiversity, etc. When you think about are we on track, I think what you have to think about is how we have been intentional about this growth. So I will take a minute to look at what has happened in the union budget. Of course, no one is unfamiliar with the Pradhan Mantri Surya Yojana scheme. If you have not bought solar, this is the best time to buy, by the way, grid-tied solar for your house. The payback is reduced by 2+ years. So, you know, it's essentially free electricity, better than actually putting your money into the bank. That's the kind of proposition the government has built with that rebate structure. So, you know, 48,396 crores, for those who love numbers, are precisely the numbers allocated in the 2025 budget to the Power Ministry. Of this, north of 50%, 26,549 crores goes to Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. So when you talk about growth acceleration and you talk about these are the engines for growth, I think the way you allocate capital towards it matters. So that's been done. The second piece is the detail of it. So number one, I will highlight that the solar grid sector itself has been given a 1,500 crore allocation, which means grid stability, which is an important component of renewable energy, remains at the center. Second piece, the PM Kusum Yojana, which essentially is the heartland of agricultural India, which is a big part of our economic infrastructure, if you like, is going to get around 2,600 crores allocation, which is up relative to 2,525 crores in the financial year gone past. This is representative of essentially being able to solarize all the agricultural pumps, which in turn is lowering the cost of production, which in turn is increasing the yield, which in turn should make our fields, our farmers' fields, far more productive and profitable, which is about sustainability. Sustainability of income I'm talking about. The third piece, of course, is the Pradhan Mantri Surya Yojana scheme, which is the flagship program. That program's funding has been increased from 11,000 crores to 20,000 crores. That's an 80% up on that, which means the intention is turning into action. And finally, of course, the National Hydrogen Mission, doubling the investment it's got, and not to mention the Nuclear Energy Mission announcement. So when you look at the vast landscape of solar, hydrogen, and then backing it with Manufacturing Made in India mission, the government has definitely produced a budget of resolve, of resilience, and of the rise of the consumer spending ability. Now, what I will say that as we move forward to remain on track, our execution capabilities have to be doubled down on. I mean, if anyone is in the solar game, it is not easy to standardize solar installations today. What can a consumer expect? To what standard can you expect to have an inverter and a panel perform in your house? How can you get visibility of what you are actually saving? How can you know that you have the right kind of equipment which is standardized to an installation code being installed? All these things that have happened in countries that have actually doubled down on this type of growth, we need to embrace and learn from to give that sustenance to the consumer at the end. And finally, what I would say is efficiency of project deployment, to be able to get faster deployment happen. So 1 crore is the number of households that we said we are going to solarize in this country. Can anyone in the audience take a guess as to how many we have done so far? Any guess? Just a number. No, 7 lakhs. That's all we've done. 93 more lakh houses have to be getting this solar rooftop scheme. Can you imagine the kind of talent you need? How much solar training do you have to provide? How come I did not see solar training courses, kind of academies coming up? What about like digital connectivity of these solar systems? Where are those startups? What about the ability to, I guess, have standards which are related to it? How about clearing mechanisms for the subsidies to be fastened? All that ecosystem development remains to be an opportunity. And the fact that we are 7 lakhs, you know, service. Solar is a purchase that stays on your house. It's like buying a power plant for your house. You are self-reliant. You are as Atmanirbhar as you can be, frankly. I mean, Viksit Bharat 3.0 kya 4.0 hai solar. In the sense that you've got your power plant, you can decide how you wish to use your energy. That's the level of digital energy technology revolution that has happened in the world. As we bring it to India, how are we going to make sure that it's fast? You as a consumer should be able to design a energy system in which you can participate with your excess energy stored in your battery or in your solar system, and you should be able to have a reward for changing your behavior. On a hot day, you are not at home, solar is pumping fast, you have a hybrid inverter, preferably from Luminous, in which you have stored your excess energy into the battery capacity, and you get a price signal from the grid saying, hey, do you want to run your system, your household air conditioning system on your stored battery? And you say yes, you should be incentivized for that. That's the world we can live in.
Thank you, Preeti. So 7 lakh, we just have our solar power till now. So my next question to you is, Vineet, to you, is, so what kind of a role does logistics play in terms of these new engines of growth, be it solar power, be it other forms of renewable energy, or for that matter, semiconductors? Where does logistics come in over there? Because if we still have just powered, solar powered only 7 lakh homes, we have a long way to go. So
absolutely, and logistics actually goes across all industries, and it is needed in every possible way, from the raw material for glass, that is glass, or even the panel infrastructure, and ultimately even the movement of those panels. Like we have a multimodal network that we are moving today, solar panels in containers from the plants, or if they're coming from overseas, onto rail network that puts it onto a ship that takes it from Tuticorin to Gujarat, and then we again take it on rail to Bikaner or somewhere where the solar plants are being put up. And also the household deliveries of each of these plants to even village level. So you would need logistics there. You need logistics in semiconductors. Do you know substrate for semiconductors need to move at 20 degrees ambient temperature. There's no 20 degrees in India anywhere per se, at ambient throughout the year, which means you need a cold chain for semiconductors. If you talk about even with semiconductors, the vibration level of movement has to be at a certain level. It cannot even tilt this much. There's no road in India that can happen. So you need to have solutions around movement of any kind of product, any of the new growth engines, which means a completely new generation of logistics opportunities. 20 years ago, there was nothing like telecom industry, 20, 25 years ago. It is a brand new industry. Similarly, I think if we talk about 10, 15 years from now, these will be the new industries that would have revolutionized the country from a logistics perspective. Now, whether we are ready from a country's perspective, no, clearly not. Whether we need to do a lot more, yes. Whether it is moving not just from road to other modes of transport, because you need to bring down logistics costs as well. There is a lot to be done.
Manish, when I was making the opening remarks, I said that in the spirit of open house, we will dig deeper. And from a technology enthusiast to a technology leader, we've been tracking all the interesting things you've done over the past decade at Panasonic and throughout your career. I have to ask you, when we go through a lot of the headlines that came out of the budget, semiconductors is a space you understand well, AI and IoT is a space you understand well. Do you think that there was just mere lip service to some of these terms? Did we need to hear a lot more, given what's happening around the world as we speak?
Preeti, first of all, I find myself lucky to be one amongst those 700,000 rooftops.
I hope it's Luminous.
I work for Panasonic, so 10 years before we had a higher conversion efficiency. But yes, for sure, my next would be a Luminous. It might appear when we look back in the time, quite often we can either challenge our decisions or appreciate them. If you look at last 10 years, much of the conversation has happened across various strategic initiatives. I think when the program of Make in India was launched, televisions were very fashionable. And therefore, the conversations those years used to be that, should we have our own display fab in the country? And if you go back and recall in the first MSIPs, a couple of companies participated, but it's been 10 years, not one has hit the ground. And this time again, we see certain interventions where at least bonding will start to happen in the country. And I believe to let things into fabrication, into semiconductor manufacturing happen, country has to become integral part of the global supply chains. And I may elaborate on this in a while. So I think it's not lip service. I believe a potential confluence would be just about a few years away. And the way I look at it is, I'll throw some data points here. So we are roughly around $120 billion of electronics manufacturing, which happens in the country. And while the vision of the leadership is that we should take it up to $500 billion by 2030, I chair the FICCI's Electronics Manufacturing Committee, and last year we did a structured study because electronics has started to cut across automotive applications, telecom, medical, consumer electronics, and so on and so forth. So we got everybody together, and McKinsey helped us to conduct this study to see that realistically what is that which we should aim at looking towards 2030 and the interventions which are required, including the policy interventions. We are looking at a $425 billion of a reasonably objective number by 2030. And while we talk, we sit at a value addition of 23% in the country. So you can do the mathematics. We have roughly about $27-28 billion of domestic value chain which is already operating. Of that also, a lot is coming in from elsewhere. And so far, none into semiconductor is part of this. And looking towards 2030, the structured study reflected that of $425 billion, 45% of value addition can happen. And look at the compounding impact which it will create. From a current level of $27-28 billion of domestic value addition, we are looking at $160-170 billion. It is imperative that semiconductors should pitch in. But what we have taken is a realistic approach of looking at that, what exactly is possible for us to do. And something which we are very passionate about is when it comes to electronics, I think something which cuts across everything is all what is mounted on the board. So while we'll continue to look at fabrication to happen, but we have taken a mission that in the first instance, we will ensure that all what gets consumed into electronics gets populated in the country. And you'll be surprised to know that while we talk, still $12 billion of populated PCB boards are coming in from elsewhere. How will you know that what are those components of which we are looking at manufacturing to happen beyond semiconductors in the country? So I believe a parallel approach of ensuring that we do semiconductors in the country, we also should look at enabling the component manufacturing starting from, say, PCB boards to laminates, which are the low-hanging fruits. And before I conclude, I think in semiconductors, a lot of good work has started to happen. So before we start to build really large foundries in the country, a lot of effort is happening in fabless verticals. And some homegrown companies I also very closely work with are investing a lot in building their own IPs. And to begin with, we can entrust the responsibility to let them manufacture elsewhere, but I think we should start to build and control the IP and the design. So that kind of work is already happening.
Fascinating insight. Sachin, let's build on that. Manish spoke about fabless. He spoke about what's happening in the semiconductor space. You have a really cool product that you can talk to us about as well. But if we build on just that, in your industry, there are concepts like the circular economy, sustainable manufacturing. We can talk about urban mobility solutions. But just generally speaking, do you think that if you look at what's been happening in India in the tech space for the past few years, if we're taking on the dragon, or if we're taking on what's happening in China and now in the US, especially with some of these emerging industries, Make in India was the clarion call for the longest time. But if you look at the number of patents and IPs filed in China, you see that design in China seems to be working now. Should we be focusing now on design over here in India? It's a more cogent sort of approach rather than just make in India.
I think absolutely. See, I come from the era where I worked in Silicon Valley designing microprocessors for Sun Microsystems. I have 3 US patents, and this is the time when NVIDIA, which is right now the talk of tech town, $3 trillion company, slightly less now, nobody wanted to join that company. This was on San Thomas Expressway in Silicon Valley on end of San Thomas Expressway was Intel, Cisco, NVIDIA was just one building. The people who went to NVIDIA were the ones who did not get their job in either Intel or Sun Microsystems. Now, everybody used to talk about Intel, right? Everybody thought of Sun Microsystems. Where did they make their microprocessors? In a fabrication laboratory or a fabrication firm called TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor. They did not invest in fabs. See, if we are going to try and reinvent the wheel, then we got to reinvent at scale that is incomprehensible in the era that we live. If we are just going to focus and put our fabs in designing RAMs, static or dynamic RAMs that go into your phones and go into your mobile laptops, like SRAMs, DRAMs, what are we doing? The world has moved on. Intel is struggling. Sun Microsystems no longer exists. Cisco struggling. And we are now trying to reinvent what they already, we always thought Intel was the number one. Remember? Intel inside. That's the era. No, we don't need to focus on it. We gotta focus on design elements. We gotta focus on high voltage. We gotta focus on power electronics. We gotta focus on AI consumption, the chips that can be used for that. But why make it? Because we will never, ever be able to put that scale in. So I just give you an example, and I think that will help you understand what I'm talking about is, India, we can make a Taj Mahal. We can go to the Taj Mahal and admire it for a day, for 48 hours, for longer. Try going to the Great Wall of China, Great Wall. You go to the Great Wall, it's just a set of bricks. You can't even admire it more than 10 minutes. But what they have done is over centuries, across generations, what we have built is Taj Mahal. Both are unique in their own way. We gotta focus on Taj Mahals. We can't just replicate that scale.
Preeti, I would like to come to you now because when I was earlier chatting with you, you talked about localization. You said that we just can't ape America because India is a totally different country. So we need to innovate for India. So would like you to build upon that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, I'll set the context by saying that Luminous is a household name. Our inverters and batteries have been serving Indians across the country in more than 90 million households. So every day we learned for the last almost 38 years what are the grid conditions and how an inverter actually functions in those grid conditions depending upon that particular state. And here's the magic thing. It is very, very specific to every state. Voltage bands, and I will not get too technical, I'll simply say, they are far broader than any other market that at least I have witnessed, and I have witnessed a few in my life. Our voltage bands are far, far broader than that. Our grid resilience is quite different. Today, as we sit here, whilst we are a power surplus country, we are still the most inefficient grid in the world in terms of transmission losses. So when we think about localization, the other piece I would put forward is we are also a consumer company. And here's what we saw. We saw the consumers in rural India buying a lot more appliances. I have this saying that by the size of the inverter that we sell in our company and mapping it through years, we can actually talk about how the rural economy in India has progressed. Because our size of inverter has gone from 500 VA to an average size of 1600 VA, in a space of last 5 years. Which means the appliances an average Indian in the rural cities I'm talking about is bringing home are increasing. And as they are increasing, the way you handle them when there is a power cut condition or when there is a solar condition, you have to think about it in a very localized way. The second piece that we learned, at least, that consumers of India feel very strongly, at least in consumer products, and I'll call ourselves like fast-moving energy goods, not consumer goods, but energy goods for the consumers. They expect service, and they expect service locally. They are aware that I need to be serviced the same way, and they've worked out that if this is a certain type of product, I want that service availability to be no different to what it would be if I was in a metro. So reach actually matters to the consumer. So we've then learned that localizing our power electronics capability to meet the Indian needs is a thing. Now, just building on what you were saying there, I think when we think about logical IP, or when we think about central processing unit architectures, which is where we can go, or we think about AI, we should think about AI logic that meets the consumer needs of India. To that effect, for example, we've been working on a tiny ML that will be part of our microcontroller, which will predict, based on the power cut history of, say, Jaipur or a small town in Jharkhand, what the power cut will be tomorrow. Now, this is very localized. This has actually got nothing to do with assembly. We often confuse in India localization with only manufacturing assembly. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about components built with intelligence to actually meet the consumer need, which is specific to who we are. To that effect, just building on the semiconductor piece as well, I don't know if you followed or not, but there was an RIC SC5 chip that was built by a young startup called Shakti. I don't know if you are aware of it or not. I mean, it's like Shakti is kind of inspired by the Russia and China model. Now, why aren't we programming Shakti into the controllers, which are inverters, which are made in India for Indian conditions? This is a very niche space. In your words, it's a Taj Mahal. It's a Taj Mahal. And it gives you an edge. It gives you an advantage to then take that IP to the next stage as well. So localization is one at the component level. The other is at the intelligence that you put into the component. The third is actually serving the consumer. All those three opportunities do exist and can be done.
Sachin, I would now like to come to you. I know you have a very interesting anecdote to share about how you've localized the e-scooters as well as your e-cycles. I'm sure our audience would be interested.
So we sell e-scooters in rural India, in Bharat. And the biggest driver of adoption of these e-scooters in these places, believe it or not, is electrification. Now, we have grown up taking electricity for granted. We have electricity in our hotels. We have grown up in households. When we were born, electricity was in our homes. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and you know, the refrigerator, my mother used to keep it in the living room. When I went to the US, I never saw the refrigerator in the living room. It wasn't there. And the reason we kept the refrigerator in the living room is because they wanted to tell the guests coming in, we have access to this. Same thing is happening in rural India. The Betiyas, Asansols, Devariyas, even Prayagraj, Aras, these cities of India, I challenge you, you will not even get the spelling right when searching on Google Maps. Some of you might. But when you go to these places, two things you see. First, mobile plug points, or plug points that have come into the living room. And the guests, they will go out of the way to tell the guest, sir, apna phone charge kariye. They will tell you stories about how in the evening, you know, people or generations of people are meeting around the electricity, the light that have come in their roads. They're meeting around there, and they have set things between 5 and 7 p.m. These are homes that have access to an alternate source of energy other than what? Kerosene, dried wood, and dried cow dung. And the closest petrol station or gas station is about 40 kilometers away. In these places, the landmark is what? Next to the gas station, next to they say petrol station, next to the petrol station के बाजू में, वहाँ से petrol station से आप जाओगे तो ये है. Imagine how transportation is changing for them when from that same plug point, now you can charge a scooter. See, the average consumption household, and for average household, the consumption basket, you know how much is transportation? It is more than food. Food is about 30-35%. Transportation is about 30 to 40% between the children, the parents, and the grandparents. These are the households that used to buy the black bikes, and now they buy the scooters. Because a scooter can service 50 to 60 kilometers for this household and increase productivity. That is the power of electricity coming into these towns. It's unbelievable.
You know, usually when you're doing these sessions, I see that the audience needs a lot more caffeine. I'm very, very fascinated and impressed that everyone's tuned in. So everyone needs to be rewarded. A quick show of hands. Since we've all tuned into the budget, the announcement about no income tax up to the 12 lakh limit, was that a blockbuster announcement? Can we have a show of hands? How many of you all thought so? Okay, fair enough. That's a 60-70% crowd. Manish, I'm coming to you with that. You have consumer insights here. With premiumization as a trend in your industry, how much do you think that announcement will genuinely spur consumption and growth?
The definition of premiumization itself, I believe, is starting to change. And if you go back, suppose a decade before, we used to believe that we are a cost-conscious market. But I think people have started to appreciate going beyond the initial cost of acquisition to, say, total cost of ownership. So factors like how energy efficient a particular appliance is over the total life cycle, how much of reduced cost, both on account of energy consumption and, say, the maintenance cost. You look at air conditioners. Every year you have to, say, get the filters cleaned and get the machine maintained, and we used to hear that gas leakages happen. So over a period of time, how does my appliance in the total life cycle cost? I think the definition of premiumization and based on which consumers make their choices itself is changing. And the second perspective is that, yes, of course, this is a phenomenal announcement. When you look at this coming together with the fact that if you compare with other emerging economies, when they made that transition to being developed, there used to be a potential $3,000 to $3,000 per capita, where exponential growth in terms of consumption of consumer appliances used to happen. We've seen this happen in China, in many other Asian economies also. So we were just about 2 to 3 years away from this situation. I think this announcement will catalyze our movement towards a potential exponential growth. And as they say, that achhe din for consumer appliances industry is potentially round the corner. And another thing which, before I conclude, is that if you look at again last, and this is my own analysis, if you go back to, say, 2001, 2002, and if at all a need hierarchy used to exist, refrigerators used to sit on the top, followed by, say, television, washing machine and an air conditioner. But then all of a sudden, mobile phones started to sit on the top. And in the initial years, there used to be a significant amount of money which used to go into the service charges and beyond. But I think now, I mean, there are two ways to look at it, but the technology or the specifications into camera and processing is no longer changing as fast as it happened in the years gone by. So I believe that that also will create more discretion to consumers to, say, make their purchasing decisions for consumer appliances.
Vineet, you understand the supply chain like no other. Just building on that point, across the country, given what's happening with India's growth story and what we expect, given what Manish just mentioned, will this sort of an announcement and some of the other announcements that we heard in that budget speech and through the document, do you think there will genuinely be a multiplier effect like economists and everyone is expecting with India's consumption story?
Absolutely. Let's start with some things before we get to consumer. First is infrastructure. The kind of investment that's going into infrastructure, the 10.2 lakh crore, and this is continuous for 2 years now. So it didn't happen as much as it was budgeted last year, but did not happen as much, and the previous year. So we've really doubled in the last 4 years the percentage of GDP spent on infrastructure in the last 4 years. So that means that the kind of impact that is about 3 to 4x on the economy, the multiplier effect. It also has a direct implication to 10 to 15 different industries, whether it is cement, steel, or earth-moving equipment companies, or so on and so forth. So that kind of a multiplier effect has clearly a very, very strong proposition. Now, putting money into the hands of consumers with the budget, with the tax cut, essentially will mean that consumers would want to demand more, and which means that hopefully it'll kick off private capex. Now, that's been the bane of the economy for the last year and a half or so, is that Government is pushing capex, but private sector is not coming up because there's still a lot of capacity that exists. That capacity utilization has not come up. So with this consumerism increasing a little bit more, we would definitely see that change. And we see these trends because we operate from all over the country, across verticals and across industries, and we are seeing that certain trends have already started reversing, not just because of the budget cut, but because we have come off from a good monsoon, so rural economy is starting to pick up. There has been some pent-up demand that is still there, that is starting to come up. So we will see some push happening. Notwithstanding, I think we also get swayed by numbers of the large companies. FMCG companies are not doing too well, as we've read, but there are lots of local brands that are doing phenomenally well. Yeah. If you go to there's an atta guy in Rajasthan and Gujarat that does only in Rajasthan, Gujarat, and they're doing phenomenally well. They've added staples also. And like this, there are companies all across the country in various product categories that have come up, which is spurring domestic demand, consumption as well. Remember, we are still going at 6 to 7% at a very large base. It's not less. It is still growth versus many economies. So I think this will further spur up some level of consumption.
So I think at the moment it's consumption, we get a little carried away, we go on and on, but I'll try and bring the topic back to the new engines of growth. And my next question to you, Preeti, would be on an HR question. So we all know that there's a huge dearth of professional trained talent in India, skilled labor. So it'll be interesting to hear from you when it comes to these new age sectors. Are we facing the same challenge? You did touch upon it in your opening remarks, if you could build upon it.
Yeah, so yes, these new skills are definitely a challenge. For the work we have to do, I think I gave the example of solar, but I can tell you, even in lithium-ion production, we don't have enough engineers who know how to switch on a machine that actually puts the cells processing plants together. We rely on China, and if we don't give Chinese the visas, we have to send 150 to 200 people to China at a time. India, Make in India is not just manufactured in India by putting parts together and buy them from China. It's also machine manufacturing. All the machines have been built to specs which are written by Chinese engineers, and they know how to operate that process better. We've never run that process. Let's get real, huh? We didn't make lithium-ion cells. We don't do any downstream like value addition. We don't convert silica to polysilicon. We are still debating whether we should invest in ingot manufacturing. So when we say we want to create a production-linked incentive scheme and we want to build cells, be it EV cells in India to battery packs or PV cells in India to battery packs, we also have to back-end it with an investment in skills. And there are two things we have to do. One is we cannot shut the doors on learning from other countries. Because either you know it, and I am going to just put out an open challenge. I don't actually think we have a course on renewable engineering in our country. IITs haven't built it yet. We are not reinventing our system of education or expertise based on skills. To be quite contrarian, I would say this. We should not worry about just IITs, which is great. I think it's a start. But we should actually start investing in having an Indian skills passport in the growth engines. So if you've learned cells, thappa laga do. If you've learned how to operate a machine, thappa laga do. That should be used by HR professionals to actually hire these people, because all these skills are new. They are not in our training courses, in our renewable energy degrees, which we actually don't have in the first place. Why don't we have it? What are the academicians waiting for? We have these solar installation. How to do solar installation to a standard. We've had to open our own solar academies. We've opened our own solar academy. 7 of our own solar academies operate across the country, and we actually take installation partners and we train them in a design and deployment way that is a more sustainable way. We are the ones, now hybrid inverters. China doesn't make hybrid inverters that much, by the way. They make mostly grid-tied inverters because they don't have grid resilience issues. So who's going to train these people in actually deploying a hybrid inverter? In fact, the only company, very few companies in India, including Luminous, are the only ones who make hybrid inverters. Just to give you an example, hybrid inverter is solar jab chal raha ho, to you can actually put your solar into the grid. Agar nahi use karna ho, to usse battery mein store kar lo. 2 for the price of 1 is only something an Indian consumer could want, and only in our Indian grid conditions. Ab usko kaun padhayega? And not to mention connectivity. So I think when we design these great ambitions, one is we have to have agile education systems. We have to really dial down our obsession with IITs and IIMs and dial up our obsession on skills. So I urge the academia to start a skills passport in our country, and that is what we should collect Uber points for every time somebody anywhere in this country learns a skill which is worth gathering points on, and we should make a national database on it. Now that would be a transformation, I think. I don't know, you have to ask the education minister as well.
I'm just saying there's a bunch of headlines from this conversation, a lot of viral moments, but can I also request our team to share a couple of mics with the audience? Maybe we can open up to them for a couple of questions. If we could get that arranged. Sachin, since the energy is high, I know that your product is very interesting in the e-scooter market, but if you look at what's happened with EVs, just zoom out a little bit on a macro perspective. Initially, the conversation in auto was all about maybe hybrid being the stepping stone to electric. And now we've sort of leapfrogged to everyone, even a lot of manufacturers who've flip-flopped and reneged on the fact saying, boss, now we're getting into EVs. Do you think that that's genuinely the way forward in a country like India? And I'll tell you why. When there's always a counter-argument, right? The flip side being, where's that energy coming from? What, is it actually better for the environment? Does it mean this is a product for Gen Z? Is EVs and electrification the way forward for a country like India, since we're talking about India's growth engines?
Well, first I will say is don't get confused by what has happened in the EV space so far. Because what happened was the government came in with the FAME 1 and FAME 2 subsidies that were completely irrational. And the OEM started catering to the subsidies rather than to the consumer. To put it in perspective, roughly about 80% of two-wheelers in China on the roads are EVs. We all hear about a BYD, right, which has taken over Tesla. BYD was a scooter company. It started with e-scooters. If, for example, what we see in India was happening in a country like China, it would virtually be every nook and corner a scooter blowing off every minute or so. That is not the case. The technology that we have in lithium-ion cells is evolving very fast, is stable, but you got to design it right. The engineer in me, the blood of that engineer boils when I hear that we can't even design a single EV right. I mean, I come from Bombay. In 90% of the urban homes, there will be a pressure pump, right? A pressure pump that is driven from the grid current, and it's working fine. You don't see it blowing up, right? What is an EV? You are right now, when you have a petrol EV, you have an IC engine on top of which the consumer is sitting. There is a spark going on 4 times a minute or 4 times a second with a blow, like an IC engine. Imagine the piston is going boom, boom, boom. You're replacing that with the same motor that you have in your homes, just driving it off the current of a lithium ion. You just misdesigned it. Because you were trying to access the FAME 1 and FAME 2 subsidy, which was on a per kilowatt hour basis rather than on a per scooter basis. Tell me, if your usage is 10 paisa per kilometer, if you use an EV, and 2 rupees per kilometer when you use petrol, why do you need subsidy? Why does the consumer need subsidy? So I think that's the future. And you can move on to the other guys.
Of course.
So, we talked about all the new age growth engines, and I cannot not ask a question around quick commerce. And Vineet, we were chatting just before we got onto the stage about quick commerce logistics. So, companies setting up dark stores. I mean, earlier it was unheard of, even, kind of transporting a product from a warehouse to a consumer's home, a centralized warehouse to a consumer's home was considered as uneconomical, and there were a lot of questions being raised. And now we see companies setting up dark stores in every locality. So how sustainable is quick commerce as a business?
It's still not affordable, for sure, that I can tell you. Well, the evolution has been quite phenomenal in the last few years. We started off with e-commerce, of course, as a new channel. If there's an FMCG company, that their typical channels were, they would take it to a warehouse and then it will go to a wholesaler, to a distributor, and finally to a retailer. Or it would go to like a big bazaar or a Reliance store, or it would go through the canteen stores, or the various channels existed. Their own stores also existed. Now that channel got disrupted when Amazon came in 2015-16 or so. And more e-commerce, or Flipkart before that, started pushing products into the homes directly, which means that supply chains had to change, which meant that today from that particular FMCG company's warehouse, you're now servicing another new channel. That was basically a behavioral change. Because, when in 2016-17, when e-commerce started in India, and I was talking to a few friends who used to live overseas, and they said, we also order our toilet paper via Amazon. I said, what? That's not possible in India. And, we are doing it right now. So it has, we have made that behavioral change when it comes to e-commerce. Instant gratification is a new generation phenomena, and instant gratification through quick commerce is what every kid wants. And I did not believe in it also till one day my son said, we had to apply for a visa, and we said, let's go and take a passport size photograph. He said, no, we don't need to do that. He got his older brother to take a camera, stand there, took a picture of him in high resolution, mailed it to one of those quick commerce guys, and within 10 minutes he had the passport size picture. And I was transformed. I said, wow, this is happening. Which meant that supply chain networks are also changing more rapidly. Now, if you're getting a product at home in 10, 15, 20 minutes, it's not just the dry product, but you're also getting a perishable product. You're also getting a cold product. It could be an ice cream that you're getting in 10 minutes. Now, which means that the back-end supply chain for all of those things have started to change. Now, that same FMCG company has added another new channel to their distribution network, which is the step before the dark store. Now, we do a lot of management of that several of those warehouses that are fulfilling those dark stores. And the kind of orders that happen is just crazy. It's just, it's accelerated like nothing ever. And to that extent that some of the orders we are doing at Six Sigma levels, because the number of orders that are there, they're coming up so fast, and they all have to be accurate. And they're going to the pods or the dark stores, which is finally delivering to consumers. So instant gratification is here to stay, I think. It is going to change a lot of things. How many of them will survive? It's basically money. How much money can someone throw down the drain? It's the race to the bottom. So essentially, we are going to see several other companies that are coming in, as we know, and it will be a race to the bottom.
No, I think that's fascinating. In fact, I just returned from San Francisco, and a lot of the AI founders there, Indian origin, were missing Zepto and Blinkit for the same reasons you mentioned, to get those printouts, to get everything. We leapfrogged when it came to them using Venmo and us coming up with UPI. I think this is a fascinating insight as well. Very quickly, we want to cram in a couple of questions. Anyone would like to ask this stellar panel a question? Could you quickly raise your hand? There we have someone out there. Could you please introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah. Thank you. My name is Gagan Kumar. So I have a question to all of you. That is the rapid evolution in technology is something which is causing hesitation amongst the private sector to go for big ticket investment?
I would say so, absolutely. If you were to ask me a simple question that which lithium-ion chemistry is going to be there 12 months from now, I wouldn't have an answer. And if I were to invest in the current lithium-ion technologies, I might get it completely wrong 12 months from now.
Preeti?
Yes, yes. If you open a solar panel plant and you deploy TOPCon machines, you know that in less than 2 years' time, TOPCon will not actually be the cell that you will be using. All this major capex is obsolete. And you know, if you think about our financial sort of systems, we don't actually allow for this kind of fast technology obsolescence in our depreciation approach as well. Most of the capital plants and machinery today is depreciated over 10 years or more. Now technology is obsoleting in 2, 3 years, maximum 5 years. So there is a whole revisit from a financial spectrum as well as of course the physical changes that have to go in. So that's certainly something that you stop and think about when you're making large investments. These are not cheap items. You know, it doesn't matter who you are, they are significant investments. And hence, why we've heard so many announcements of plants coming up for solar panel module manufacturing or cell manufacturing, but you don't see the capacity come into the market straight away because there is this strategic option value of delay because you don't know what the technology is doing. It's delaying you because you have to stop. Halfway through the plant, you realize that I have to reorder the machinery because the technology has changed. And we don't allow for the technology obsolescence. And I think if I had a call out for the finance minister or a request is to look at these new growth engines and look at our financial policies, particularly depreciation in light of technology obsolescence.
All right, I don't think we have time for more questions. Maybe a very quick one, because we have, okay, very quickly, if you could get the mic in the front row, please. Could you come to the front row? Yeah, you, right here, right here. But sir, I must request to implore you that we'll have to make it quick because we're out of time.
Anybody who can advise on a long-term sustainability solution for housing projects and commercial malls which can be implemented today and can sustain on a long-term basis.
Manish?
See, we've been studying, and I am part of a coalition called Resource Efficiency and Circular Economy Industry Coalition, and this is a very important subject. And I mean, while industrial, commercial, and residential may have their own set of challenges and solutions, but let's pick up residential for a moment. And if you look at last whatever number of years or decades gone by, one topic is of how bylaws continue to change, and then in line with those, the very construct of homes is changing. And second is technology. I mean, modulars and prefabricated already have started to be a large portion of what happens in Japan or in many Asian economies also. So how will we look at adopting those technologies in our country? So I think a potential policy is under deliberation while we talk, which will bring out some solutions. It's a long subject. I think the very short of the response can be that.
Thank you so much. I think we're out of time for this one. Thank you for being such a stellar panel. We've gotten some great insights, Ajita, from this one, from the Taj Mahal versus the Great Wall, the approach. I think that's a takeaway. Of course, all the interesting things happening in the energy space as well and in the logistics space. Thank you all for being a lovely audience. The show has just begun. A huge round of applause, please.